Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining. Like Stuart already said, we're going to be talking about creating and customizing reports in NAV 2016 using Microsoft Word. Again, we've already introduced myself, and some of you may already know me. I'm Danica Pelgrim. Here is a web address for Intelice and my direct email address and my direct line number if at any point you want to get in touch with me and follow up with any questions or have any other general questions about NAV in general. So today's agenda, first thing we're going to start with, just going to go over some Dynamics NAV and then some Word requirements in order to use the features that we're going to be talking about today. The second topic is going to be some NAV Report Administration. It's just a couple different pieces on, where to find reports, how you'll know what report you want to use, and then where you would go to do the customization of a report. Then I'm going to actually bring NAV over here and then do a real brief demo on how to customize a report, and then I'm going to talk about how you can use a new document layout feature for customers and vendors. I'm only going to display a customer, and the same exact thing is available on a vendor. So if you find it one place, you'll be able to find it in the other place. Okay, the first topic is our NAV and Word requirements. I believe this may have been first introduced in 2013, but I am just showing the features that are available in 2015 and 2016. If your desktop icon looks like this, you're using NAV 2015, and if it looks like this, you're using NAV 2016. You have to be on Microsoft Word 2013 or higher, because I believe that's the first version where the developer tab is available. If you open up Word and go to the left-hand side and select File under Account, you can find the information there, and that tells you what version of Word that you're on. Okay, now I'm going to talk briefly about some NAV Report Administration. This is an area where you can identify what reports are being used in the system, and I'll show you a couple different ways where you can do that. The list of reports that will tell you the different layouts that you would use, and then the area where you would go to customize it. So the first area is called Report Selections. For all of the invoices, credit memos, statements, finance charge statements that you send out, the area that's called Report Selections is where all of those reports are defined. So I'm going to be really concentrating and looking and working with report number 206 today. And that is one iteration or one specific report in NAV that's available to print your sales invoice out. So based on this definition here, if I go to print a sales invoice, this is the actual NAV report that's going to be printing. With any of the reports in NAV, whether it's considered a document or not, whether it's a customer list or an aging report, if you open up a report, and you'll initially get like a window that looks similar like this, when you hit the little dark blue arrow in the top left-hand side, that's called a NAV application menu. If you go to Help About This Page, another window will open up, and it'll actually give you the name and number of the report. So if you want to customize something other than a document, that's how you would be able to figure out what report that you need to use. Now, this is the new feature that has come along with the option to do the customization of all of your reports in NAV, and that's your report layout selection. And this is a list of all of the reports that belong to whatever company you have specified up here, and that inherently will always be the company that you're in. So this is pretty much an all-inclusive list of most of the reports. And in this column right here, this is where you have the option to indicate which layout you want to use. The sample screen that I have in here, I show one of the different layout options. RDLC stands for Report Definition Language Client Layout, and that is kind of like the back-end look of where our developers would see, and where all the reports have the tables and what we call the data set, and the relationships between each one of the data sets and tables defined. Then there's a very few population of reports that actually already have a built-in Word layout. If you wanted to use that built-in Word layout or use a custom one, you would specify that in that field in the selected layout column. We're going to be using and looking at the sales invoice. Report number 206, I've created a custom layout. You can have more than one custom layout per report. So if you define a custom layout in this section, you have to specify which one you're using here. The last piece is an area that's called Custom Report Layout, and this is where you would go to start, either import and edit all of your reports. As you start editing, you have the option to also run your report. The reason why you have to start with the NAV report is, again, so that you can utilize and leverage all of the data sets as soon as you start editing a report. By virtue of the option that you selected here, you have some built-in XML code that's there. So that's why you have to start with the NAV report. Okay, so now we're going to get into customizing a report. So I'm going to bring NAV over here, and hopefully everybody can see NAV. So I'm just going to kind of review a couple of things that I showed you already in the screenshot, just so that you can see firsthand in NAV. And the way you might want to get to this section is just start typing custom layout, and then you can get to this administration area. If you select this option on the right hand side, you'll get to the same exact menu area where I am right here. So the first area that I had showed you was report selection. So I'm just going to show you that real quickly. And like I said, this is specific for all of your sales documents. And if I pull up this list, like for instance, if you wanted to modify your credit memo, you can select credit memo, and on here it would tell you which report that is actually being used if you go to print out a credit memo in NAV. So this is that area that I was initially referring to. I'm going to just jump into the report selection layout real quick, just to show you it looks pretty much like I showed you in the picture here. And by default, initially, every single report on this list is going to say RDLC. The only way it would read differently is if a user came in here and changed this, a user or one of your NAV consultant came in and changed it. I'm going to just filter right up here on report 206, and you can see that this is using a custom layout that I have here. And you can see that I do have multiple custom layouts already designed. So now I'm going to go into the third area, and this is where we're going to start actually doing the customization of the report. So now I'm going to go into custom report layout, and you can see that I already have a few of them here. The one that was actually displayed in the custom layout list was this one right here. If you wanted to start a brand new report, the way you would do that is you would select new up here, type in the report number that you want to do, and I'm going to stick with the report that we're going to be working with today, and then I would go insert word layout. When I select that, it's going to show up on the list here, and it's going to show up exactly like this, new word, new layout. So if you want to have multiple iterations of this report, I would highly recommend that you put something relatively descriptive here in order to make a distinction between the different versions that you have. Now, this particular report does not have what's considered a built-in layout. So if I started initially with this, and you go to edit the layout, this is where you would actually start trying to build a custom report. It's blank because there's nothing here. It doesn't have a built-in layout. So I'm going to close out of this real quick. Every time you open up the edit, you're going to be prompted to save this. I didn't make any changes, so I'm just going to go ahead and select no here. I'm going to select new again, and I'm going to pick a report that I happen to know has a built-in layout because I just want to show you the difference here. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit OK. And then you can see this one, it tells you right here. It's starting with a copy of a built-in layout. So if I go to edit this layout here, I have something that's pretty much already built. Now, you might not necessarily want to start with this one, but you might want to just bring this up on your table so that you could use this maybe as a point of reference or get some tips on how a report that's already available looks. So I'm going to close out of this because we're not going to use this. And I'm actually going to delete this from my list just to make sure I don't get confused. Okay, I have one that's partially, another thing that I will also want to point out here is in the new layout, since this one right here, when I had opened it up initially and I went into edit layout, it was completely blank. It didn't have anything there. One nice thing about this particular function is since we are using Word documents, what I did is I downloaded I just did a Google on purchase invoice template, and I downloaded this Word document here. You can see that all of the fields here are blank, and it just has a lot of generic information in it here, and it already has kind of like a little table defined here where you can put in, you know, your invoice detail. I'm actually going to close out of this report because if you have a Word format that you're already using, or you have a template that's available, I'm going to have this new layout that I just created, and I'm going to go to Import Layout. And here is that document, and it was real quick. It looks like nothing even happened, but then if I go to Edit Layout, here it is. Here's that exact document. And with this particular document, I can start dropping in fields from the report number 206. I already have one that's pretty much well on its way, so I'm going to close out of this. I don't necessarily want to save it. So I'm going to go into the one that I've already started. And you'll see that it looks very similar to that template that I just imported. But I already have some information in here. You can see that I already put my logo that I want to use on here. I put my company name, changed my address, and there are some other fields here that look a little different than you know, standard text, and that's some of the fields that have been brought in that are actually from the report. Now, how do I get to those fields? Like I said, it's essential that you have a developer tab here. If you don't see it, and you do know that you're on Word 2013, what you might have to do is kind of hover over to the right here on the ribbon. In Word, right-click, customize your ribbon, and you want to make sure that this developer's option right here is checked. That's most likely the reason why you can't see your developers tab. So I'm going to hit cancel, and now I'm going to hit my developers tab. Now what you need to do is to hit this XML mapping pane. Like I had said, there's some XML code going on in the background here based on the report that you have selected. What you're going to need to do, and every time you open up the report, you're going to have to select the XML mapping pane. I want to go down here, select my sales report, sales invoice, and right here you can see my report number that's listed here. And you can see that my XML mapping pane changes here. Now, like I had said earlier, you're starting with the NAV report because it has data items. Data items are generally tables in NAV. And then underneath the data items, the relationships are already there for you. So all of the information that you might find on the sales header. And you know, some of this is just going to be trial and error, just kind of expanding all of these, seeing the information that's on here. And then kind of determine what it is that you want to drop on here. Now, some of the formatting that I'm going to do here is just straight up Word formatting. So I don't necessarily want this company address here under my shipping address. I'm just going to click these two fields, and this is, you know, just standard Word formatting here. I'm just going to delete a couple of these and merge these cells. Now I, you know, want to start putting in a shipping address here. Well, I'm going to scroll down. I have to scroll down all the way down to the bottom and, you know, see where I might find some shipping information. And I've worked with this before, so I happen to know what's way down at the bottom. Now you'll see here, another thing I want to point out, when you start seeing your list of fields here, there's going to be some of them that end with the word caption. On dynamic information, you don't necessarily want to use the one that say caption, because your shipping address is something that's going to change every time you run the invoice. A caption is something like the shipping address. You know, from a design perspective, my choice is to just actually put in what I want the text to read, and I don't want to be bound by what this caption might read here. So the only reason why I'm pointing this out is if you have information that's dynamic, you want to make sure you don't want to use one of these fields that say caption. So something like this, it does not say caption, so I'm going to right-click on it, and then I'm going to get this little drop-down menu that says Insert Control, and I want to make sure that I put in plain text. And then I'm going to go put in the second ship to address, and then again put plain text. I think you get the point. You just kind of continue down this path, remove the text that you don't want, merge the cells if you want, and then continue on. Now, in the body of this particular document, on your lines, you're typically going to have more than one line, or it's likely that you'll have more than one detail line when you start printing out your sales invoices. And in this section is where you might have one or more records. Now, this is something that you need to keep in mind, and this is going to be very important to making that detail appear correctly when you start running the report. Where all that detail resides is on your sales invoice line. So what you want to do is select that row that's going to be what's called the repeating row. My sales invoice line, that is the table that's actually going to repeat. So I want to right click. I don't want to select a field here. Where you see these little pointers here, these are your data items or your specific tables that are in the report. And this is the table where I want to get my data from. So I'm going to right click on it, insert control, and then here you can see the description of this is a little bit different. It says repeating. So I'm going to select repeating, and you can see that something happened to this whole entire row. So this row is going to repeat. Even if I have multiple lines in my sales invoice, this repeating function is actually going to what makes the row repeat when I run the report. So now I want to drop in a couple more pieces of information here. So now I want to get my quantity. One nice thing is these pretty much seem to be in alphabetical order, so I'm going to find a quantity for sales line, right click on that, insert control, and do plain text. Now I'm going to put my cursor in the product description field. Product description is the header that's there, but actually description is the name of the field. And again, like I said, some of this is going to be a little trial and error. Pick a field, drop it on here, and you'll see in just a minute where we can go and run the report and see what kind of data we're getting. This, I happen to know, is a unit price. So I'm going to find unit price here, and I want to make sure I do not pick the caption field. I actually want to pick the unit price for the sales invoice line and put that in here. And then amount, again, maybe one of the things that might be trial and error, my line amount. I'm going to select my line amount field, insert control, plain text, and there I go. A couple other things, again, some standard word functionality that you might want to use here. I don't necessarily want to see this information on my invoice. In notes, you might just want to put some remittance information, and this is just free form typing, and put your bank name here, and then routing information and account number information, so that your customers will have the payment information. Now, let's say I don't necessarily want this here. I want it located a little bit more closer to a footer. So that I'm just actually going to select this whole entire table, cut it, and again, this is all just standard Word functionality here. I'm going to insert a footer, blank footer, paste that here. So now I have this in the footer, and it'll always show closer to the bottom of the page. And for now, I think I'm done doing all some edits. I want to go in and I want to see what this report is looking like so far. But first thing, before I do that, I do want to come in and I want to format this so that it prints to the left here, so this is lined up really nice. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to get that same message that we had seen earlier when I had gone in here. And yes, I want to save this at this point, so I'm going to hit yes. Now I can stay right here, and I can run this report, and I can see what this is looking like now. So when we looked in the report selections layout area, we already had a report defined, but then when you're running the Word reports, anytime you print, it's going to want to open up a Word document. So now I can do it, and then you can see now I have some information here. And this is actually the information off of invoice 103042 in the system. And now you can see that there's some line information here, and if there was subtotals, discounts, or taxes, that would appear here in the invoice. But oh, I forgot to put my payment terms on here. So let's go back. I can go in and out of this report and edit it as many times as I want. So now I'm going to go back in. Now every time you go back in, you do have to go to your Developer tab, select the XML Mapping, and then select your invoice off of the list here. So I am going to go down and see if I can find payment terms someplace in here, and it's kind of nice. So here's a payment terms description. I'm going to put my cursor in the field here where I want this description to be. Insert control, plain text. Now one thing I do want to point out that's a caveat of this design is when I do come back in here, for some reason anything that's on the repeater row, it does not maintain the positioning criteria that I put here. So every time I come in and I want to do an edit, I do have to come back and align this and then close it and save it. And now I should be able to see, when I run the report, I should be able to see payment terms on here now. There you go. Now there's my payment terms. I also want to note that there are some things on these reports, like if you have special layouts or you want special formatting on the numbers here, that might require a little bit of customization and to the actual back-end report, and that's something that we'd be happy to help you with, or you can contact your NAV consultant if we are not your NAV consultant on record. So now that if, for instance, I wanted to start using this report layout, it's not actually a complete report yet, but if this is the one that I wanted to start using, when I printed all of my sales invoices, I can go back into my report layout selection and then filter on my report 206. And then since there's multiple iterations of report 206 here, I would just come here and select this report. But I'm going to leave this here because this one actually is a nicely laid out report at this point in time. So that's how you go about customizing the reports in NAV. Here's just a couple of reminders about what we just covered here. In order to customize a report on your ribbon on the Developer tab, you want to make sure that you select the XML mapping, and then you'll get that little pane that'll open up on the right-hand side. You'll want to look at this pull-down list and make sure you select the invoice and the invoice number that you'll be using for the RDLC design. When you're adding a row that repeats, you have to select that row in the table. And when you're actually, that's one thing that I forgot to mention, when you're actually adding fields in the report, you want to put a table within the document and select the row that you're going to repeat. So you would select that row in your table, go over to your XML mapping, select the data item that contains the information that's going to repeat. When you select the data item, select Insert Control and then hit Repeating. This is just a reminder, like your captions are going to be static information. So you want to, if you have repeating rows, you want to make sure that you pick the dynamic information and make sure that you don't pick something that's a caption. Only use captions, like if you want the word address appear on your invoice, or use that as headers on some of your columns. To add dynamic information like your customer name and address, information that would change on every report and on the lines, you would pick your field and then go to the Insert Control and hit Plain Text. The document layouts, what that is the reason why I have multiple versions of report number 206 and the custom report layout is you might have one or two customers that you may want to send, or they've requested a specific layout. So if you want to, in order to print one-off or email one-off reports, if I go to a customer record, and you actually have to be inside the customer card, I go to the Navigate tab, hit Document Layouts. I can add a new record, and I can indicate I want to use report number 206. And then I created a layout that I called Invoice Layout Orange. The reason why I called it Invoice Layout Orange is because I have some text highlighted in orange. So if I bring my NAV screen back over here, I'm going to hit Home and go to Customers. And the one customer that I did this on was this one right here, and I'm going to double click to get into the customer card, go to the Navigate tab, and under Document Layouts, you can see that I've indicated this particular invoice format custom layout is the orange one. So I'm going to come out of here, and then I'm going to go to the list of posted invoices for this particular customer. I'm going to select anyone. I'm going to select the last one on the list. If I go to the Actions, Print, and I preview this, you can see it has some orange highlights, and you can see that this is actually really different, or not really different, but substantially different than the one that we had been working with earlier in the demo. So if I wanted to send this particular customer one-off invoice, this is the format that would be sent to them. So you take advantage of a little bit of unique functionality that's been added to the newer versions in NAV. A couple helpful hints that I just want to kind of review again. You want to make sure that you have Microsoft Word version 2013 or greater. Just want to remind you that you need to have the Developers tab. And the way you would get the Developers tab in Microsoft Word is you can right-click on the ribbon if you don't see that tab, and make sure that you check the little box that says Developer. This next little tip here is very significant, because specifically on that Report 206, that document does not have a built-in layout. There is a property on the report that's called Word Merge Data Item, and this is something that you might have to have your NAV partner or NAV consultant assist you with. That property needs to have the first data item filled in there. I don't necessarily expect a standard user to understand that, but if we are not your NAV partner, you can just maybe pass that along, and they might already know, because if you were to print out a range of invoices, if this property is not filled in on a document, it's not going to repeat for you. So if I want to print out 5 invoices, it's only going to print out the first one if this property is not filled in. I've also included a list of a handful of reports that actually do have built-in layouts, so that you can pull that into your custom lists and maybe use those as a starting point or use them as reference. This tool is best suited for documents and simple lists and letters and maybe some contracts that you might want to almost create some sort of a mail merge, but you do need to start with an inherent NAV report. I would exercise caution if you are using any third-party application that's being integrated with some specific documents, like if you're using Zetadocs or Document Capture. Check with your NAV consultant before you start using and changing settings that might be using some custom reports, because you might disable some of the functionality of third-party add-ins that are using specific reports. Since this is more geared for documents, and although the AP check is a document, Word does not handle totaling and grouping very well, and there's a lot of code in the AP check that makes it work on the specific, for a stub and a face, the face of the check. So it's not recommended, and I think it would be a very, very difficult and challenging endeavor in order to use the Word document to format an AP check. So that's all I have to cover today. If anyone has any questions, or if they have any ideas for future topics, please don't hesitate to email us. First or second week of January, the next webinar topic that we're going to be covering, since this is a hot topic around January every year, we're going to be talking about closing the year and your 1099 process. Again, here's my contact information. You can contact me via email or by phone. Either way will work. Also, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. No, I just, be patient with yourself. There is, with anything new, there's a learning curve, and I strongly encourage anybody out there who's been watching to give it a go, and please don't hesitate to contact us, your NAV partner, if you have any questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to help.